A veteran and his dog found a woman clinging to a log, but her secret was buried under the waves. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. On a stormy evening, the winds howled through the trees, and the waves of the lake crashed relentlessly against the shore. The storm had arrived out of nowhere, a sudden fury that caught everyone off guard. The sky had darkened, and the air was thick with rain and the promise of something ominous. In the small town of Crestwood, located just on the edge of the lake, the storm was a familiar, though always unwelcome, visitor. But that night, the storm was different. As the wind picked up, the small town fell silent, the usual sounds of rustling leaves and distant chatter drowned out by the roar of the rain. That's when it happened. Grant Mercer, a 40-year-old combat veteran, was out in his old, beat-up truck, driving through the storm. He had been living a quiet life since returning from the war, his days filled with routine, the kind that dulled the edges of his memories. The dog beside him, Scout, a German shepherd he had rescued years ago, was his only true companion. The dog had been with him through thick and thin, always by his side, sharing the loneliness of a man who had seen too much but had never really found a place to belong. They were just passing through the outskirts of town when it happened. Scout's ears perked up, his body stiffened, and he started barking furiously. Grant slowed the truck, his grip tightening on the wheel. He looked at Scout, who was now standing at attention, his nose pressed to the windshield. "What is it, boy?" Grant muttered, squinting through the rain. He pulled the truck to a stop and got out into the cold downpour. Scout was already darting ahead, his paws splashing through the puddles as if he knew exactly where to go. Grant followed, his boots sinking into the soft earth beneath the pounding rain, his heart racing as he tried to make sense of the strange urgency in Scout's behavior. Then he saw her, a woman, soaked to the bone, clinging desperately to a log that had been carried to the shore by the waves. She was shivering, her clothes torn and heavy from the water, her face pale, lips blue from the cold. But what struck Grant most was the way she looked at him, wide, fearful eyes that seemed to plead for help. Without thinking, Grant rushed toward her, his training kicking in as he steadied her with one arm and pulled her to safety. The woman was weak, barely able to stand on her own. She coughed violently, trying to catch her breath. "Are you okay?" Grant asked, but the woman could barely manage a nod. Scout, always alert, stood by her side, his eyes scanning the surroundings as though he sensed something more than just the storm. They made their way back to the truck, Grant helping the woman into the warmth of the cab, while Scout jumped into the back seat, still keeping a vigilant watch. The rain continued to pour, but it wasn't just the storm that unsettled Grant. It was the strange sense that something was off, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. The woman, despite her apparent relief at being saved, seemed to be holding something back. Her silence was heavy, and there was a look in her eyes that told him she wasn't just a victim of the storm. No, there was more to her story, much more than met the eye. As the truck rumbled down the road, Grant's mind raced. Who was this woman? And why had she been out there in the first place? There was a secret buried somewhere deep inside her, something she wasn't ready to reveal. Yet Grant could sense it, an unspoken truth lurking beneath the surface. As they drove in silence, the storm raged on, and the only sound that filled the truck was the rhythm of the rain against the windows and the soft panting of Scout, who had finally settled down but still kept a watchful eye on their mysterious passenger. I'll be honest, the woman was strange. She didn't speak much during the drive, only staring out of the truck window, her fingers trembling as they wrapped around the worn seatbelt. Grant could feel her tension, her unease seeping into the truck's quiet atmosphere. Scout, as always, remained vigilant, eyes darting between Grant and the woman, sensing there was more to her than just a survivor of the storm. He knew something was off. Grant had rescued people before. He'd seen fear in their eyes, the raw panic that comes from being at the edge of life and death. But this woman, she was different. Her silence was heavy, like a burden she wasn't ready to share. He tried to break the ice, offering her a comforting smile. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice warm. though his thoughts were still tangled in confusion. The woman hesitated before answering. "Emily," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. Grant nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "I'm Grant. This is Scout," he said, motioning to the dog in the back seat. Emily didn't respond. She just stared out the window again, her expression distant, as though she was looking at something beyond the storm. They didn't speak much more after that. The drive was long, but the storm showed no sign of letting up. The rain was relentless, pounding against the windshield, and the wind howled through the trees like a warning. When they finally reached his small cabin on the outskirts of town, Grant was exhausted, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something Emily wasn't telling him. The cabin was modest, tucked away in a quiet corner of the forest, far from the chaos of the town. It wasn't much, but it was home, just a simple one-bedroom house with a wood-burning stove and a small kitchen. Grant had lived there ever since he returned from the war. It was quiet, peaceful, the perfect place for someone who didn't want to be found. He parked the truck and got out, heading around to the passenger side to help Emily. She was still sitting there, staring blankly out the window, her hands pressed tightly against her lap. Grant opened the door gently, offering her his hand. "Come on, let's get you inside," he said softly. She glanced up at him, her eyes tired, almost hollow. She nodded, slowly taking his hand as he helped her out of the truck. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice shaky. "For saving me." Grant gave her a small nod, but his mind was racing. He had saved people before, but something about this woman didn't sit right with him. "It's no problem. Just glad we found you when we did." Emily didn't say anything else as they made their way to the cabin. She was like a ghost, drifting silently behind him. As they entered, Scout immediately jumped onto his bed, curling up in his usual spot by the stove. Emily stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the small, humble space. The cabin was cozy, but there was a coldness about it that even the warm glow of the stove couldn't quite erase. Grant motioned for her to take a seat. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll get you something warm," he said. He moved to the small kitchen, pulling out a pot and setting it on the stove to heat some soup. Emily didn't move at first. She just stood there, her eyes lost in the flickering flames. Grant glanced back at her. "I'll be right back," he added, trying to reassure her. But when he turned to make the soup, he noticed something strange. Her eyes were filled with tears, though she wasn't crying. It was as if the weight of something much deeper was pulling at her, something she didn't want to face. Grant set the soup on the counter, moving quietly to her side. "Hey, are you all right?" he asked gently. She looked up at him, her face pale, and for the first time, she spoke in a voice that cracked with emotion. "I'm not who you think I am," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Grant's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice steady but with a hint of concern. Emily shook her head, taking a deep breath. "I've been running from something I can never escape." She pulled the sleeves of her wet coat down, revealing an old, faded tattoo on her wrist, a symbol that Grant didn't recognize. It was a strange, cryptic mark, something ancient, almost forgotten. "What's that?" Grant asked, his curiosity piqued. Emily hesitated, then looked up at him. "It's a warning," she said, her eyes filled with sorrow. "A warning that I don't belong here." Grant felt a chill run through him. He wasn't sure what Emily meant, but he knew one thing. Her story was far from over. And whatever secret she was hiding, it was buried deep beneath the surface, just like the waves that had nearly claimed her life. I had never seen anyone so broken. Emily sat there, her eyes distant, like a storm that refused to end. The crackling of the stove was the only sound in the cabin, but the silence between us was thicker than the rain outside. Grant moved to the small table, his hands still shaking, unsure of what to do next. He had rescued people before, but this felt different. This woman was carrying something heavy, a secret that was beginning to weigh on both of them. She had told him she wasn't who he thought she was. But that wasn't enough. Grant needed answers. Emily had taken a sip of the soup he'd prepared, but it was clear her mind was miles away. Her fingers trembled as she placed the spoon back down. "I didn't ask for any of this," she whispered, her voice hollow. Grant leaned in, his voice gentle but insistent. "What happened to you? Why were you out there, in the storm, all alone?" Emily stared into her cup for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Finally, she met his gaze, and her eyes seemed to darken. I ran away, she said quietly. I've been running for years, from a past I can't escape. Her voice wavered, but she pushed on. You don't know who I really am. What I've done. The people I've hurt. Grant didn't say anything. He could see the pain in her eyes, a torment that was deeper than anything a storm could bring. It was a personal storm, one that had been raging inside her for years. Who are you running from? Grant finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily hesitated. Then, with a heavy sigh, she pulled up the sleeve of her coat, revealing the faded tattoo on her wrist. It was a strange symbol, one Grant didn't recognize. It looked old, almost ancient, like it belonged to another time, another world. This tattoo, Emily continued, was given to me by someone who promised to protect me. But he lied. He turned on me, and now I'm being hunted. Grant's heart raced. He could feel the weight of her words, but he wasn't sure if he could trust them. He knew people who had been through trauma, but this was different. There was something more to Emily's story, something beyond what she had said so far. Hunted by who? Grant asked, his voice steady but urgent. Emily's eyes grew wide. By the people who own this mark, she said, her voice trembling. They're not just people. There's something else. Something that shouldn't exist. And now they want me back. They want me dead. Grant's mind was spinning. He had heard of strange stories, even experienced things that couldn't be explained, but this was something else entirely. He tried to push the thought away. Maybe she was just confused. Maybe she had been through something so traumatic that she was starting to lose touch with reality. But the look in her eyes told him this was no illusion. Emily wasn't lying. I can't go back there, she whispered, her voice breaking. I can't let them find me. Grant felt a pang of sympathy for her. He had seen the pain of war, the scars that went beyond the body, and now he was seeing the same thing in this woman, a different kind of battle, but a battle nonetheless. He had to help her. You're safe here, Grant said firmly. As long as you're with me, no one's going to hurt you. But even as he spoke, something in the back of his mind was telling him that this wasn't going to be as simple as he hoped. There was a deeper mystery to Emily's story, something that connected her to the very land they were standing on. Grant didn't know it yet, but the truth was far darker than he could ever imagine. And that night, as the storm raged outside, a new revelation began to unfold. The woman he had rescued wasn't just running from her past. She was running from something much worse. Something buried under the waves, waiting to resurface. I could feel the tension in the cabin, thick and unyielding, like the storm outside that refused to die. Emily's words hung in the air, a dangerous secret that she wasn't sure she should have shared. The look in her eyes, however, told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't lying. Whatever she was running from, it was real, and it was something I couldn't begin to understand. They want me dead, she had said, the fear in her voice unmistakable. Those words echoed in my mind, unsettling me as much as the thunder crashing in the distance. I had seen my share of danger in my time, both in the battlefield and on the streets, but this was different. Emily wasn't just afraid, she was terrified, and for good reason. I sat down across from her, trying to find the right words. Emily, who are these people? What do they want from you? She glanced around the room as though the walls might have ears, as though someone was listening in on us. She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. They're not people, not really. There's something else. Something ancient. They've been after me for years, ever since I left. Her eyes flicked toward the window, watching the rain as if it held the answers she wasn't yet ready to give. I was beginning to understand that whatever she had run from, it was no ordinary threat. It was something larger, more sinister, than any of us could grasp. I leaned in, my curiosity growing despite the unease gnawing at me. What do you mean by something else? I asked. Emily hesitated, looking at her hands as if the truth was buried deep within her own skin. There's a secret, Grant, she said, her voice cracking slightly. A secret buried in the waves of that lake. My father, he was part of something that was supposed to stay hidden. But when he died, everything changed. The people I've been running from, they're trying to find me. They want what he left behind. And they'll stop at nothing to get it. Her words were like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't quite put together. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. What did your father leave behind? I asked, though I feared the answer. Emily swallowed hard, her throat dry. I don't know exactly, but I think it's buried beneath the lake. I think it's been there for years. And I think they know where it is. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the weight of her confession pressing down on me. And for the first time since meeting her, I realized just how deep this went. This wasn't just about Emily's past. It was about something much larger, something that had been hidden for far too long. How do you know this? I asked, my voice low. Emily shook her head, her fingers trembling as she clasped them together. I don't know, she admitted. I've always known, deep down. My father never talked about it, but I could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at the lake. There was something there that he never wanted me to know. But now I think I do. I leaned back, processing what she had said. The lake? It didn't make sense. But then again, nothing about this situation made sense. I had a feeling I was about to find out a whole lot more than I ever expected. As if on cue, Scout let out a low growl from the corner of the room, his ears pinned back, his body tense. I turned to him, confused, but before I could say anything, Emily's eyes widened. She stood up abruptly, her face pale. They're here, she whispered, barely audible. I didn't have to ask who she meant. My hand instinctively went to the gun I kept hidden under the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. Emily's panic was contagious, and I could feel the danger creeping in. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and I knew that whatever was coming, it was much closer than I had imagined. What do we do? I asked, my voice steady despite the growing tension. Emily looked toward the door, her face a mix of fear and resolve. We don't have much time. They'll be here soon. I have to go. I can't let them find me here. You have to trust me. I didn't want to trust her. I didn't know if I could trust her. But I had no choice. Something inside me told me she was telling the truth. And if I didn't help her now, the consequences would be unimaginable. I'll help you, I said, standing up. But we're doing this together. The storm outside grew louder, the thunder rumbling like the warning of something terrible approaching. As we moved toward the door, I knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. Whatever secret Emily was hiding, whatever was buried beneath that lake, it was about to come to light. And I was right in the middle of it. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as Emily stood by the door, her hand shaking as she reached for the knob. The storm outside was more than just a weather event now. It was the perfect cover for whatever was coming. I had no idea what kind of enemies we were facing, but Emily's fear was enough to make my blood run cold. Grant, we have to go now, she whispered, her eyes wide with panic. I nodded, trying to steady myself. The cabin, once a place of comfort and solitude, suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Whatever was outside, whatever was coming for Emily, was closing in. I grabbed my jacket, tossing it over my shoulders, and moved toward the door. Scout growled low from his spot near the stove, his fur bristling. The dog had been on edge all night, and his instincts were never wrong. I opened the door, and the wind hit me like a physical force. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with tension, charged with the promise of something bad about to happen. I glanced at Emily. Her face was pale, but she looked determined, more determined than I'd ever seen her. Where do we go? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Emily didn't hesitate. There's a place, a hidden cave beneath the lake. I've been there before, but they'll be looking for me. They know I'll try to run. They always know. I didn't question her. There was no time for that. I turned to Scout, signaling for him to follow. The three of us stepped outside into the darkness, the cold air biting at my skin. The woods around us were quiet, unnaturally so. No rustling of animals, no wind through the trees, just silence. It felt like the calm before a storm. But I knew better. The storm had already arrived. We moved quickly, cutting through the trees, Emily leading the way. I could hear the crunch of leaves beneath our feet and the soft panting of Scout behind us. It was a strange, eerie kind of quiet. No birds, no rustling of leaves. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath. After what felt like hours, we reached the edge of the lake. The water was still, reflecting the pale moonlight like a sheet of glass. Emily pointed toward a cluster of rocks near the shoreline. It's there, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I followed her gaze, my eyes scanning. The rocks. There was nothing unusual about them. Just a collection of weathered boulders, smooth and worn by the passage of time. But then, Emily moved forward, stepping to the side of the rocks, revealing a narrow opening. It was almost hidden, camouflaged by the dark shadows of the night. Without hesitation, Emily stepped into the opening, and I followed. Inside, the air was cool and damp, the smell of earth heavy around us. The cave seemed to stretch on forever, winding deeper into the earth. I felt my pulse quicken. There was something about this place, something ancient, as though it had been waiting for us. Emily led the way, her hand brushing the walls as she moved, her steps sure and steady despite the darkness. We moved deeper into the cave, the sound of our footsteps echoing off the stone walls. I kept glancing back at Scout, who was walking silently beside me, his eyes scanning every corner, his senses heightened. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice breaking the silence. Emily didn't answer right away. She kept moving forward, her face shadowed in the dim light. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "This is where it all started. My father found this place when he was younger. He said it was a key to something bigger, but I never knew what that meant until now." Her words hung in the air like a riddle. I didn't understand what she was talking about, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever was buried in this cave, it was more than just a hidden secret. It was a part of something far greater, something that had been lost for generations. We reached the end of the cave, and Emily paused in front of a large stone slab. It was covered in markings, strange symbols that seemed to pulse with an energy I couldn't explain. She touched the stone, her fingers tracing the symbols with reverence. "This is it," she said, almost to herself. "This is what they've been searching for." I stepped closer, my curiosity getting the better of me. "What is it, Emily?" I asked. "What are they after?" She turned to face me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and something else, something I couldn't place. "They're after what's inside. What my father left here." My heart skipped a beat. I felt the weight of her words like a physical blow. Whatever it was powerful. And whatever was coming for us, they weren't going to stop until they had it. Emily stepped forward, placing her hands on the stone, her fingers glowing faintly as the symbols began to shift. The air around us crackled with energy. "This is the beginning, Grant," she said, her voice trembling. "The beginning of everything." As the stone began to move, I realized that this was no ordinary cave. This was a place where the past, present, and future collided. And as the entrance to the hidden chamber slowly opened before us, I knew that whatever lay ahead, there was no turning back. I stood frozen as the stone slab before us slowly began to shift. The air grew thick with anticipation, the walls of the cave humming with an energy I couldn't explain. Emily's hands pressed gently against the surface, her fingers glowing faintly as the markings on the stone seemed to rearrange, revealing something hidden underneath. My heart raced as the stone moved, slowly sliding away, revealing a darkened chamber beyond. The room was vast, and the air inside felt ancient, as if it had been sealed off for centuries. A faint light flickered from within, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Emily didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the dark interior. "This is it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "This is what they've been looking for." I followed her, though every instinct in my body told me to stop, to turn back and forget all of this. But it was too late. The door had been opened, and there was no going back. As we stepped into the chamber, I could see what she meant. The room was filled with objects, relics from a time long forgotten, old books, pieces of metal, strange symbols etched into the walls. In the center of the room, there was a pedestal, and atop it, something that shimmered in the dim light. A small, intricate box. It looked ordinary, yet it felt like it held the weight of 1,000 years. Emily walked toward it, her steps slow and deliberate. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched the box. "My father, he kept this hidden for a reason," she said, almost to herself. I couldn't take my eyes off her, my mind racing. What was this box? What was it that her father had kept locked away in this secret place for all these years? "Emily, what's inside?" I asked, my voice tight with tension. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "I don't know," she said softly, "but I think it's the key to everything. The key to why they've been after me, and why they won't stop until they have it." My stomach churned as I took a step closer, my eyes never leaving the box. The more Emily spoke, the more I realized that whatever was inside, it wasn't just a family secret. It was a weapon, a tool, or perhaps a piece of history that could change everything. Before I could ask her more, the faint sound of footsteps echoed from the entrance to the cave. My heart skipped a beat. We weren't alone. Emily's eyes went wide, and she immediately reached for the box, her hand shaking. "We have to go," she whispered urgently. "They found us." I didn't hesitate. We had to move fast. I grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her toward the exit, my eyes darting around the room, searching for any sign of danger. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Scout, who had been silent all this time, suddenly stood up, his hackles raised. He growled low, warning us that something wasn't right. "Come on, Scout," I shouted as I dragged Emily toward the exit. We made it back to the entrance of the cave just as the footsteps reached the threshold. But we weren't fast enough. A shadow appeared in the doorway, and I froze. The figure was tall, dressed in dark clothing, and their face was hidden by a hood. They stepped forward, their presence sending a chill through my spine. "You shouldn't have come here," a deep voice said, almost mocking. I could feel Emily stiffen beside me, her breath shallow. She was terrified, but I couldn't back down now. I didn't know who these people were or what they wanted, but I knew they weren't going to stop until they got what they came for. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady but my hands clenched into fists. The figure tilted their head slightly, as if amused by my defiance. "What we want is none of your concern," the figure said. "But what we'll do to you, that's something you'll soon understand." The words sent a shock through my system, and my instincts screamed at me to run. But there was nowhere to go. We were trapped. "Emily, what are they after?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Emily's eyes were wide with fear as she stepped in front of me. "They want the box," she said, her voice trembling. "They want whatever my father hid inside." The figure stepped closer, their eyes gleaming from beneath the hood. "Give it to us," they demanded, their tone colder now. "And we might let you leave here alive." I didn't hesitate. I wasn't going to give them anything, especially not after hearing that threat. "No," I said firmly, my heart racing but my voice steady. "You're not getting it." The figure's lips curled into a smile, but there was nothing friendly about it. "Very well," they said, stepping aside to reveal more figures emerging from the shadows. There were more of them than I could count, and they were all armed. It didn't take a genius to know that this was a battle we weren't going to win. Emily stepped back, her hands trembling. "We have to run," she said urgently. I didn't need any more convincing. I turned and bolted, pulling Emily along behind me as Scout raced ahead. The storm was still raging outside, but it didn't matter. We were in a fight for our lives, and the only thing that mattered now was getting away. I could feel the ground beneath my feet tremble as we sprinted through the thick forest, the sound of footsteps following close behind us. Emily was panting heavily, her breath coming in short bursts, and I could hear the unmistakable sound of Scout's paws slapping against the wet earth as he pushed ahead, leading the way. The figures in the cave were gaining on us. The storm had worsened, and the rain was pouring down harder than before, making it harder to see, but it also covered our tracks. The wind howled through the trees, whipping at our clothes and stinging our faces, but we couldn't stop. There was no time for hesitation. "We have to get to the truck," I called over my shoulder, my voice hoarse from exertion. Emily's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. She didn't need to say anything. She was with me, running just as hard as I was, but I could see in her expression that the weight of what we were running from was starting to sink in. It wasn't just the people chasing us. It was the box, the secret, everything her father had hidden away in that cave. They wanted it, and they weren't going to stop until they had it. We broke through the edge of the trees, and the truck came into view, parked just ahead, barely visible through the rain and mist. I reached the truck first, throwing open the door and jumping into the driver's seat. I didn't even check the back. I just slammed the door and started the engine, the roar of the truck's engine cutting through the night like a lifeline. Emily was right behind me, diving into the passenger seat, her face twisted in a mix of exhaustion and dread. She barely had time to close the door before I slammed my foot on the gas, the truck lurching forward as I swerved through the mud and toward the road. I looked in the rearview mirror, my heart sinking as I saw the figures still emerging from the tree line, moving fast, closing in on us. There was no question about it now. They were not going to let us go. "Grant," Emily said, her voice tight with panic. "They're coming for us. We're not going to outrun them. They'll catch us." I kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. "We'll make it," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "Just hold on. We'll get out of here." But even as I spoke, I could feel the truck's tires slipping on the muddy road. The rain had made everything slick, and the road ahead was barely visible, shrouded in fog. I glanced over at Emily. She was staring ahead, her eyes distant, lost in thought, as if she was bracing herself for something worse. I couldn't blame her. Whatever this was, whatever secret her father had hidden away, it was bigger than either of us could comprehend. I pressed the gas harder, the truck lurching forward as we sped down the road, but the figures were still there, still chasing us. I could see them now in the headlights, moving with unnatural speed. I cursed under my breath. "They're getting closer," I said. Emily's face turned pale. "Grant, they're not human. They're not going to stop." I didn't say anything. I didn't have time to argue or to try to make sense of it. We had to keep going. We had no choice. I glanced in the rearview mirror again, my stomach sinking. The figures were almost on us now. I couldn't outrun them on this road. We needed a plan. Fast. "Take the wheel," I said to Emily, my voice sharp. "What?" She blinked at me, confused. "Take the wheel," I repeated. "I need to make sure we're not followed." Before she could respond, I threw the truck into gear and pulled off the road, skidding to a stop at the base of a small hill. I turned off the engine and grabbed my bag from the seat next to me. "Stay here," I told Emily, my voice low and firm. "I'll be back." I didn't give her a chance to argue. I opened the door, grabbed the rifle I had kept in the back of the truck, and slammed the door behind me. The rain hit me like 1,000 needles, and the wind pushed against me as I moved quickly, silently, toward the tree line. I knew they were coming. I could feel it. The sound of their footsteps had gotten closer, the heavy, deliberate thud of boots on the wet ground. I wasn't sure how many there were, but I knew one thing. If I didn't stop them here, they would catch us. And if they caught us, Emily wouldn't make it. I crouched behind a large rock, my heart racing in my chest. The storm was a blessing and a curse. It covered our tracks, but it also made it harder to hear what was going on. But I could still see their shadows, moving in the mist, their figures shifting like wraiths in the darkness. I took a deep breath and steadied my hands. I had one shot at this. The wind howled through the trees again, and as the figures came closer, I could hear them speaking in low voices, their words muffled by the storm. My pulse quickened. This was it. I aimed carefully, my finger on the trigger. They were close now, too close. I exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. I could hear the sound of the wind howling in the trees, the rain lashing against the ground. As I crouched behind the rock, rifle in hand, my heart was racing, and every instinct in me screamed to run, to take Emily and Scout and disappear into the night. But that wasn't an option. Not now. Not when we were so close to being caught. I tightened my grip on the rifle, steadying my breath. I had one shot, one chance to stop them from getting any closer. The figures moved silently through the trees, their movements calculated and precise. They were not just hunters, they were predators, and they knew exactly what they were after. Emily's face flashed in my mind, her fear, her desperation. She couldn't be caught. Not by these people. Not by whatever they were. I took a deep breath, watching their movements, waiting for the right moment. I knew they were close now. Too close for comfort. My finger rested lightly on the trigger. The rain was coming down harder, the sound of it pounding against the earth drowning out everything else. I had to move fast. They were almost upon me. I held my breath, waiting, watching. Then, just as one of the figures stepped into view, I exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, sharp and clear, echoing through the storm. The figure fell to the ground with a thud, and the others froze, their heads snapping in my direction. I didn't wait for them to react. I was already moving, running back toward the truck, my feet slipping on the wet ground as I pushed forward. I had to get back to Emily. She couldn't be left alone. Not now. Not with those people coming after us. I reached the truck in a few seconds, throwing open the door and sliding into the driver's seat. Emily was already there, her hands shaking, her eyes wide with fear. "What happened?" she gasped, her voice tight with panic. "They're after us," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "We have to go? Now." I slammed the door shut and turned the key, the engine roaring to life as I threw the truck into gear. The tires skidded on the slick road as I hit the gas, the truck lurching forward. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. I could hear the sound of footsteps behind us. The others were catching up, but I pushed the truck. Harder, trying to put distance between us and them. The rain had turned the road into a muddy mess, and the truck slid dangerously close to the edge, but I kept my focus, my grip on the steering wheel tightening with every turn. The storm was making it hard to see, but I knew I couldn't stop now. Not when they were so close. Emily was silent beside me, her face pale, her eyes darting around as if she were waiting for the next attack. She kept glancing back, her fear palpable, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't. I glanced at her, my voice low but firm. "Stay with me, Emily. We'll get through this." She nodded, her lips pressed tight together, but she didn't speak. I could feel her tension radiating from her, the weight of everything we were running from hanging heavily between us. The road twisted ahead, and I fought to keep the truck on course, the headlights barely cutting through the thick fog. I could still hear them, the distant thud of boots hitting the ground. They were close. Too close. I pressed harder on the gas, the engine roaring as I pushed us faster, but the road ahead was barely visible. We were in the middle of nowhere. No one could help us. We had to make it out on our own. "Grant," Emily said suddenly, her voice shaky. "We can't outrun them. We have to do something." I didn't respond right away. What could we do? The only thing we had on our side was time, and even that was running out. I looked at the road ahead, the thick trees surrounding us on either side. There was nowhere to hide. "We need to get to higher ground," I said finally, my mind racing. "If we can get to the ridge, we can see them coming. Maybe we can find a way to fight back." Emily nodded, her fears still visible, but she didn't argue. She knew what was at stake. We needed to survive. I turned the truck off the main road, driving up a narrow dirt path toward the ridge. The trees seemed to close in around us, the darkness swallowing us whole. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands gripping the wheel tighter as I fought to keep the truck on course. We reached the ridge in a few minutes, the truck bouncing over the uneven ground. I slammed the brakes, bringing the truck to a screeching halt. The headlights illuminated the clearing ahead, but there was no sign of the figures yet. They were still too far behind. I turned to Emily. "We hold here. We wait." She nodded, her eyes still scanning the darkness, her fingers wrapped tightly around the seat. We were out of options. This was our last stand. The storm raged on around us, but inside the truck, it was eerily silent. We waited, the minutes ticking by like hours. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something worse than what we had already faced. Emily's breathing was shallow, her body tense, but I could see the resolve in her eyes. She wasn't giving up. Neither was I. I sat still, my eyes fixed on the dark path ahead, heart pounding in my chest. The truck had come to a halt at the ridge, the engine rumbling faintly beneath us, but the surrounding woods were silent. The rain had slowed, and the air felt thick with tension. Emily was beside me, her body stiff with fear, her eyes darting between the rearview mirror and the darkness that stretched out before us. I could feel her worry, the weight of her past pressing down on us both. We had made it this far, but the question still lingered. How long could we keep running? The silence stretched on, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves and the distant sound of thunder. I turned to Emily, my voice quiet but firm. "We need to move. We can't stay here for too long." She nodded but didn't speak. She didn't need to. She knew the danger was still out there, closing in on us. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, and started the engine again. The truck jolted forward, and I pushed it up the ridge, where the trees were thick and the ground was uneven. The higher we climbed, the more I could sense that something was wrong. My instincts were screaming that we were being watched. I glanced back at Emily. She was tense, her hands clenched in her lap. "We're not alone," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice tight. "They're out there," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "The ones who've been hunting me." I didn't need to ask for clarification. I could feel it too, the strange sensation that we were being tracked, stalked by something beyond the storm. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness, but they barely made a dent in the oppressive blackness surrounding us. We were vulnerable here, exposed, and the road was getting rougher. I knew we needed a plan, but I wasn't sure what to do next. "Emily, tell me more about what happened." "About your father," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tension in my chest. She looked at me, her face pale, eyes filled with memories she wasn't sure she wanted to share. "My father was part of something Something dark, she began, her voice faltering. I don't know the whole story, but he was always so secretive about it. He found something that was meant to stay hidden. But when he died, they came after me. They came after the secret he left behind. I swallowed hard, processing her words. What is it, Emily? What's in that box? Why do they want it so badly? She turned her gaze away, looking out the window, as if searching for something in the distance. I don't know exactly, she whispered. But it's something powerful. Something dangerous. And they'll do anything to get it back. My mind raced. Whatever was in that box, whatever her father had left behind, it was more than just a family heirloom. It was a key to something much larger, something that could change everything. The road ahead seemed endless, the trees closing in on us like a tunnel. My heart raced, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. We need to get to higher ground, I said suddenly, my mind snapping into action. There's a cabin a few miles from here. We can hide there, regroup, and figure out our next move. Emily looked at me, her face etched with fear, but there was something else in her eyes, something like hope. She nodded, and I took a sharp turn onto a smaller path that wound through the forest. The truck creaked and groaned as it bounced over the uneven ground, but I kept my foot on the gas, pushing the truck forward. The storm had started up. Again, the wind picking up and the rain lashing against the windows. The road grew steeper, and the trees grew thicker, but we didn't slow down. We couldn't afford to. Every mile felt like a lifetime, and I knew that every second we spent on this road was a second closer to being caught. Emily was silent beside me, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. I could feel the weight of the secret she carried, the burden of her father's legacy pressing down on her. But I also knew something else. She wasn't going to let them win. She wasn't going to let them take what her father had left behind. We reached the cabin just as the storm reached its peak. I parked the truck behind the small wooden structure, its silhouette barely visible in the rain. The cabin was isolated, nestled deep in the forest, and it had been years since anyone had lived there. It was the perfect place to hide. I threw the truck into park and grabbed the bag from the back seat. Stay close, I told Emily, my voice low. We need to be quick. She nodded, her face pale, but her eyes held a quiet determination. We climbed out of the truck, and I locked the doors behind us. The rain poured down in sheets, but the cabin was only a few steps away. We made our way to the door, and I pushed it open. Inside, the air was cold and damp, but it was shelter. It was a place where we could rest, even if only for a moment. I turned to Emily, my heart pounding in my chest. We'll be safe here for a while, I said, but even as I spoke, I knew that the danger wasn't over. It was only just beginning. I closed the door to the cabin behind us, locking it with a quick turn of the handle, my senses still on edge from the chase. The storm outside seemed to intensify with every passing minute, the wind howling through the trees, making the whole world outside feel like an unforgiving, shifting maze. I could feel the weight of our situation pressing down on me, the storm a small echo compared to the looming danger. Inside the cabin, the air was damp and smelled faintly of mildew, the wooden walls old and worn, but it was still shelter. For the moment, we were safe. Or at least, I hoped we were. Emily stood by the small stone fireplace, her back to me, her eyes scanning the shadows of the room as though she was expecting something, or someone, to materialize out of the darkness. She didn't speak, but I could feel her mind racing, the burden of her father's secret hanging heavily between us. I didn't know exactly what it was or why they were hunting her, but it didn't matter. All that mattered now was keeping her safe. I grabbed a few logs from the corner and placed them in the fireplace, striking a match to light the fire. The flames flickered to life, casting a warm glow across the room, though the chill of the cabin still lingered. You need to rest, I said, my voice firm but gentle. We've made it this far. Take a few minutes. Emily didn't respond, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the toll the last few hours had taken on her. She had been running for so long, and now that we were in a temporary refuge, her body was finally letting her feel it. But even in the quiet of the cabin, I knew it wouldn't be long before we had to move again. I sat down near the fire, keeping my eyes on the door, listening for any sounds from outside. There was no sign of them yet, but I knew better than to think they were gone for good. I could feel their presence in the air, like a storm on the horizon, waiting to strike when we least expected it. Emily slowly made her way over to the table, her movements tired, but deliberate. She glanced at me once before sitting down, her hands folding tightly in her lap. She was silent for a long moment before finally speaking. "I didn't tell you everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, waiting for her to continue. "My father, he wasn't just hiding a secret. He was hiding a curse." I leaned forward, my interest piqued despite the overwhelming sense of danger. "A curse?" I asked, my voice low. Emily nodded, her eyes avoiding mine. "He found something, a relic or an artifact, I'm not sure exactly. But whatever it was, it came with a price. A curse that he could never escape. And neither can I." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. "What do you mean, Emily? What is this curse?" She looked at me then, her eyes filled with both fear and resolve. "The people who are after me, they're not just after the box. They're after the curse, Grant. And if they find it, if they unlock it, they'll unleash something that could destroy everything." My heart skipped a beat. What she was saying was impossible. A curse? Something that could destroy everything? It sounded like something out of a nightmare. But as I looked into her eyes, I saw the truth in them. She wasn't lying. Whatever her father had uncovered, it was far darker than I could have imagined. "How do we stop it?" I asked, my voice tight with urgency. Emily took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. "I don't know, but I know we can't let them get their hands on it. If they do, if they open the box and release whatever's inside, we're all doomed." I stood up, pacing the small cabin. My mind was racing. What could we do? How could we stop them? I had no answers, only questions. "Emily," I said, turning back to her. "What's in the box? Why is it so important?" She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I wish I knew. My father never told me. But I know this much. It's not just a treasure. It's something ancient, something that shouldn't be disturbed. And now it's too late. They're coming for it. They'll stop at nothing to get it." I clenched my fists, the frustration rising inside me. I didn't have time to think about what was in the box. I had to focus on keeping us both alive. I walked to the door, looking out through the small window. The storm was still raging outside, but there was no sign of the figures yet. It wouldn't be long, though. I could feel them closing in, the hunters becoming the hunted. We had to move fast, and we had to make a decision. "We leave at dawn," I said, turning back to Emily. "We head for the mountains. If we can get there, we'll be safe. At least for a while." Emily didn't argue. She simply nodded, though I could see the fear still written on her face. She was a prisoner of her father's past, and now, we were all caught in the web of a curse we couldn't escape. "Are you ready?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "I have no choice," she said, her voice quiet but determined. "We don't have much time." I felt a sense of resolve settle in my chest. The storm might have been raging outside, but inside the cabin, we were preparing for the storm that was coming for us. And this time, we were ready to face it head-on. I woke up to the sound of the storm still raging outside, the wind howling through the trees as the rain beat down relentlessly against the roof. The cabin was cold, but the fire from the night before had burned out, leaving nothing but the faint smell of smoke in the air. Emily was already awake, sitting by the window, staring out into the darkness. Her face was pale, her eyes distant, but I could see the determination in them. She knew what was at stake. We both did. I stood up slowly, stretching out the stiffness in my muscles. My body ached from the stress of the last few days, but there was no time to rest. We had to keep moving. I glanced at Emily. "You ready?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She nodded without hesitation, standing up and grabbing her jacket. "I have no choice," she said, her voice steady. "We can't stay here. They'll find us." I grabbed the duffel bag I had packed earlier, checking once more to make sure everything we needed was inside. The rifle, the food, the maps, the tools, all essential for what was ahead. I turned toward the door, but before I opened it, I paused, looking back at Emily. "We stick to the plan. Head for the mountains. We'll make it there before they catch up." Emily nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "I hope you're right," she said softly. I didn't say anything else. There was no time for uncertainty. We had to act. I opened the door and stepped into the storm. The cold air hit me like a slap, the rain coming down in sheets. The wind was stronger now, almost blinding, and I had to squint against the sharp sting of the droplets. The trees around us swayed violently, and I could feel the earth beneath my boots giving way in places. It was a battle to stay upright, to keep moving forward, but we had no choice. I motioned for Emily to follow, and she did, pulling her hood up against the rain, her face grim but resolute. Scout, as usual, was ahead of us, his nose to the ground, his fur matted with the rain but his eyes alert. He led us through the woods, his senses sharper than ours. I trusted him more than anything in that moment. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of wildlife silenced by the storm. It was as though the world had gone into hiding, and we were the only ones left, running from something that couldn't be outrun. As we moved deeper into the forest, I could feel the pressure mounting. Every step we took brought us closer to danger, and I knew it wouldn't be long before they found us. They were relentless. The figures from the cave, the ones who had been chasing us, they wouldn't stop. I glanced at Emily, who was walking just a few paces behind me, her face set in determination. She was still shaking from the events of the previous night, but there was a fire in her eyes now. She had made her choice. She had decided to fight, to survive, no matter the cost. That resolve made me want to protect her even more. "We're almost there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But deep down, I could feel the weight of the storm pressing in. We had to reach the mountains. We had to get to safety. The trees started to thin as we climbed higher, and the wind picked up again, howling through the branches. I knew we were getting close to the ridge, where the cabin was hidden. But I also knew that if we were spotted, there was no escape. We'd be trapped. "Grant," Emily said, her voice shaking, though I could hear the urgency in it. "Do you think they'll stop? Do you think we'll make it out of here?" I glanced at her, seeing the fear in her eyes. The fear of the unknown. The fear of what was chasing us. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But we can't stop. Not now. If we do, they'll catch us. And we can't let them get their hands on the box. We can't let them open it." Emily nodded, but I could see her mind working, piecing together everything that had happened. She was stronger than she gave herself credit for, and I knew she was fighting just as hard as I was. We reached the ridge just as the rain started to ease up, the dark clouds parting slightly to reveal a faint glimmer of moonlight. The mountains stretched out before us, vast and unyielding. It was our only hope, but we weren't safe yet. "We're here," I said, looking around, my eyes scanning the terrain for any signs of movement. We had to be careful. We couldn't let our guard down. "Let's make it to the cabin. We'll rest there." But before we could move, a figure emerged from the darkness. My heart stopped. A shadow, barely visible against the backdrop of the storm. My first instinct was to raise my rifle, but then I saw them. More figures emerging from the shadows, surrounding us. They had found us. My blood ran cold as the figures stepped into the light, their faces hidden beneath hoods, their eyes gleaming in the dim moonlight. They were too many. Too close. "You shouldn't have come here," one of them said, their voice deep and cold, echoing through the stillness of the night. Emily's grip tightened on my arm, and I could feel her body tense. This was it. The moment we had feared was finally here. We were trapped. There was no more running. No more hiding. I didn't have a choice. I stepped forward, keeping Emily close behind me, my mind racing. This fight wasn't over. It couldn't be. I stood there, my heart racing as the figures closed in around us. The moonlight barely cut through the clouds, casting long shadows on the ground. They were too many, their movements too precise, too calculated. Emily's grip tightened on my arm, her body pressed against mine, as if seeking some kind of reassurance. But I didn't have the answers. I didn't know how we were going to make it out of this. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of options. The figures kept advancing, their faces hidden beneath dark hoods, their footsteps almost silent. On the damp earth, the cold air around us felt even colder now, like the very atmosphere was alive with danger. "You shouldn't have come here," one of the figures said, their voice low and menacing. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of fact. They had been waiting for this moment, and now they had us right where they wanted. I could see their eyes gleaming from beneath their hoods, calculating, waiting for the right moment to strike. I wasn't going to give them that moment. I wasn't going to let them take Emily or the box. Not without a fight. "Stay behind me," I whispered to Emily, my voice steady, despite the fear clawing at my insides. She didn't respond, but I felt her nod against my shoulder. She was just as determined as I was. We were in this together, and there was no way we were going down without a fight. I took a step forward, my rifle in hand, my finger brushing the trigger. But as I moved, one of the figures raised a hand, stopping the others in their tracks. "We don't want to kill you," the figure said, their voice still cold but tinged with something else, something almost like pity. "We just want the box." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You don't understand," I said, my voice tight. "Whatever is in that box, you don't want it. You have no idea what you're dealing with." The figure laughed, a low, hollow sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "We know exactly what we're dealing with," they said, "and we've waited a long time for it." I glanced at Emily, and I could see the fear in her eyes, but there was also something else there, something like acceptance. She knew what was at stake, and she was ready. She had been running from this for so long, but now, it seemed like the moment had finally come. She wasn't afraid anymore. "You won't get it," I said, my voice fierce. "Not if I have anything to say about it." The figure stepped closer, the others following suit, until they were almost upon us. But then something happened, something unexpected. From the shadows behind them, a loud, guttural growl echoed through the trees, followed by the sound of something heavy crashing through the underbrush. The figures froze, their eyes darting around, trying to locate the source of the noise. I didn't hesitate. "Get down," I shouted to Emily, pulling her to the ground with me just as the first of the figures was knocked off their feet by something massive, something fast. Scout was there, his fur bristling, his teeth bared, the dog we had come to rely on, charging at the attackers with a force I hadn't seen in him before. The figures scrambled to react, their weapons drawn, but Scout was faster. He lunged at one of them, knocking them down, his growls filling the air like the sound of thunder. The rest of the figures scattered, but Scout was relentless, attacking with a fury I had never seen in him. "Emily, get the box," I shouted, my eyes never leaving the chaos around us. Emily hesitated, looking between me and the fight unfolding, but I could see the determination in her eyes. She nodded, scrambling to her feet and making a break for the truck where the box had been hidden. I watched her go, my heart in my throat, praying she could make it. I couldn't lose her now. The figures were starting to regroup, their movements more frantic as Scout fought off the last of them, the blood from the wounded figures staining the wet ground. I turned to see Emily reaching the truck, her hand outstretched for the box. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, a sharp, metallic sound echoed through the air, followed by a blinding flash of light. For a split second, I thought the world had stopped. The light faded, leaving nothing but a ringing silence in its wake. And then, I saw it. An energy, like a pulse, radiating from the box, moving outward in waves, spreading through the trees, through the air, through us. I could feel it in my bones. The curse. The power. It was awakening. I ran toward Emily, the ground beneath me trembling with each step. "Emily," I shouted, my voice hoarse, but she didn't hear me. She was staring down at the box, her face a mixture of awe and fear. She had opened it, and we had just unleashed something we weren't ready for. The box was glowing now, the symbols etched into its surface pulsating, vibrating with an energy that felt almost alive. The storm had intensified. Again, the wind howling, the rain pouring down in sheets, but it didn't matter. What was inside the box was the real storm, and it was just beginning. The air around us hummed with a strange energy as Emily stood frozen, staring down at the box. The symbols on it glowed brighter now, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm, as if responding to the storm itself. The ground beneath our feet seemed to vibrate, the trees around us groaning as if they were alive. I could feel it in my chest, this overwhelming force, pressing down on me, suffocating me. This was no ordinary relic. This was something ancient, something powerful, and something we weren't prepared for. "Emily, close the box," I shouted, my voice hoarse, but the words barely seemed to reach her. She didn't move. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of awe and fear, as if the box was calling to her, pulling her in. I took a step toward her, my heart racing, but before I could reach her, the light from the box flared again, blindingly bright. I shielded my eyes, but I could still feel the intensity of it. It wasn't just light, it was power. The air crackled, the storm around us growing fiercer, the wind howling like a living thing. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the light flickered and went out. Silence fell. The wind died down. The rain stopped. For a moment, everything was still, too still. I lowered my hands, squinting into the darkness, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Emily slowly blinked, as if waking from a trance, her fingers still hovering over the box. I could see the fear in her eyes now, the realization of what we had just unleashed settling in. What was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know," I said, my own voice shaking. "But it wasn't supposed to happen like this. We need to get out of here." But even as I spoke, I knew it was too late. The ground trembled again, and the trees around us groaned louder, as if something was shifting beneath the earth. A deep rumbling sound filled the air, coming from all around us. And then, out of the darkness, the figures appeared. The ones who had been chasing us. But they were different now, more than just people. They were moving in unison, their eyes glowing with the same eerie light as the box. Their faces were no longer obscured by hoods, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Their eyes were hollow, their skin pale and stretched tight over bone. They were no longer human. They were something else, something twisted by the curse of the box. "You've awakened it," one of them said, their voice a rasping whisper, barely audible over the wind. "The power is ours now." I reached for my rifle, but I knew it wouldn't matter. These creatures were beyond anything I could fight. The curse had taken hold of them, and it was too strong. "Grant," Emily cried, her voice breaking. "What do we do?" I turned to her, my heart sinking. There was no running now. The curse had been unleashed, and whatever it was, whatever it contained, it was no longer just a relic. It was alive, and it was here. "We fight," I said, my voice grim. "We fight until we can't anymore." The figures were moving closer, their footsteps slow but deliberate. I could see the malevolent energy radiating from them, pulsing like the glow from the box. It was too much to comprehend, but I had no choice. We couldn't back down. We couldn't let them take the box back. "Get behind me," I said, as I raised the rifle, preparing for what was coming. Emily's hand found mine, her grip tight, her body shaking with fear. But there was no time for fear. Not anymore. The first of the figures lunged forward, its arms outstretched, and I fired. The bullet hit its chest, but it didn't fall. It didn't even flinch. The figure's mouth opened in a silent scream, but no sound came out. It reached for me, its fingers long and sharp, but before it could make contact, Scout lunged from the shadows, his teeth sinking into its arm. The creature screeched, trying to shake the dog off, but Scout held on with everything he had. "Emily, move," I shouted, turning to see her frozen in place, watching the chaos unfold. She didn't hesitate this time. She grabbed the box, clutching it to her chest as she ran. The creatures were closing in, but Emily was fast, faster than I thought she could be. She darted between the figures, using the shadows to her advantage. But as she reached the edge of the clearing, one of the creatures grabbed her arm. She screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the roar of the storm that had suddenly returned, more violent than ever. "Let her go," I shouted, rushing toward them, but I was too far away. The creature's grip tightened, and I could see Emily's face twisted in pain. "Emily," I yelled, my voice breaking, but there was no response. The creature was pulling her back toward the others, its pale face twisted into a grotesque smile. I couldn't let this happen. I couldn't lose her. I ran, my heart pounding, and just as the creature's hand reached for Emily's throat, I threw myself at it. My shoulder slammed into its side, knocking it off balance. It staggered back, releasing Emily. She fell to the ground, the box still clutched in her arms. "Run," I shouted, my voice hoarse. "Get to the truck." Emily didn't hesitate. She scrambled to her feet, her eyes wild, and bolted for the truck. The creatures were distracted now, focused on me. But they weren't going to stop. They couldn't stop, and neither could we. As Emily reached the truck, I fired once more, taking down another creature, but the others were still coming. The truck roared to life as Emily jumped in, but I couldn't make it to the door. I was too far behind. As the truck pulled away, I turned back to face the creatures, knowing this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. We had awakened something we couldn't control, and now, we were all bound to it. But I wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. In this thrilling chapter of veteran stories, a former soldier and his loyal dog are plunged into a world of danger and mystery as they uncover an ancient curse tied to a mysterious box. As they run from dark forces chasing them through stormy woods and treacherous terrain, the story explores the depths of their courage and the secrets that threaten to destroy them. Each twist and turn in the plot draws the reader deeper into the heart of these gripping veteran stories, with unexpected twists that challenge everything the protagonist thought he knew about survival and loyalty. As the storm rages on and enemies close in, the veteran and his dog fight for their lives and uncover secrets that could change everything. With each battle, the stakes rise, and the line between ally and enemy begins to blur. These veteran stories bring us face to face with the horrors of the past and the courage required to confront them. Join the journey through the gripping suspense and unrelenting action of this tale, as the veteran and his dog face an enemy that's far more dangerous than anything they've encountered before. The curse that has been unleashed is only the beginning, and in these veteran stories, survival becomes a battle against time and fate itself.